I was thinking the other day, how would Weekend at Bernie's work in real life? And guess what? Someone actually wrote an article about this. And so we're going to go through that and actually see how Weekend at Bernie's would work in real life. And this was written a few years ago, but obviously it's still relevant. So I want to go through this article with you. But before we do that real quick, I actually found another article where a couple of guys actually did do something like Weekend at Bernie's in real life. And it was in Denver, Colorado. So let's read this story first, and then we'll read the article about how Weekend at Bernie's would actually play out in real life. And if you've never seen Weekend at Bernie's, it was a movie in the 1980s where basically a couple of guys got invited by their boss to the Hamptons. And then when they showed up there, they found that he was actually dead. But before they could call the police, the people that were coming to a party that their boss hosts every week or something like that, or all the time, the guests started showing up for the party, and they didn't have time to call the cops before the guests started showing up. And the people who came to the party were so kind of engrossed with themselves that they didn't even really notice that this guy was dead. And so these two guys, the two main characters, basically decided to not let anyone know that their boss was dead, and to just kind of prop him up to like kind of carry his dead body around and even have it waving at people. They put sunglasses on him, and they kind of just tried to pass him off as still alive so they could continue to have that party and also to kind of enjoy their weekend in the Hamptons that they got invited to. So that's what that movie was about, if you've never seen it or heard of it. And I just wanted to know, like, how would that actually play out in real life? Could you really like fool people into thinking that a dead person was still alive? Not that you'd want to, but how would that actually work if someone tried that in real life? And so this first story that I want to talk about is from ABC News, and it's from a long time ago. And this basically says that a real life Weekend at Bernie's happened in Denver. So I'm just going to read a little bit from this article. So this says, in a real life Weekend at Bernie's, two Denver men who found their friend dead allegedly took his body and his credit card out for a night of diners, bar hopping, burritos, and a strip club, which is the most important part, obviously. So this goes on to say that not only did two suspects drag around their deceased friend, Jeffrey Jarrett, 43, they made him pay for everything, a police report stated. They allegedly used his bank card at an ATM to withdraw money to finance the night out of the town, according to the report. And that's apparently after they used his credit card to pay for some other stuff before that as well. So this article goes on to say that one of the men involved in this incident arrived at the dead person's house and found him unconscious. And instead of calling the police or an ambulance, just kind of like in Weekend at Bernie's, he went to the restaurant where his friend was working to tell him that something was wrong with their other friend at home. So instead of calling the police, he went and found his friend for some reason. Not sure why he did that. And then when the pair allegedly returned to the guy who was dead's house, they found him unresponsive, and they put his body in the car and went to a bar. So then it goes on to say that the two men go into the restaurant and drink, and the dead guy's in the back seat of the car. And then they made a stop at a diner after having a couple of drinks before taking the body back to the house and putting it on a bed. So apparently they didn't just drag the body around for the entire night, but they still put a dead person in the car as if he was still kind of hanging out with them, and they used his cards to pay for drinks and a dinner at a diner. And then they used his card to also withdraw $400 from an ATM and eventually went to a strip club. So this is the closest thing that I could find to it actually happening in real life, and I think that's a little bit crazy. But then I really want to know, like, based on science, kind of what would really happen if the actual scenario of the movie was playing out, where someone passed away and then a couple of guys tried to kind of pass him off as still alive. Could that possibly work, and what would actually happen if that was going on? And so let's take a look at this article from NBC News. And this article was written for the 25th anniversary of the release of Weekend at Bernie's. And so I just want to read some of this article to you because I think it's really interesting. So it starts by giving a little background saying that in the movie Weekend at Bernie's, two wild-eyed New Yorkers escort the dead body of their boss, Bernie, around Hampton Island during a wild Labor Day weekend. Just how absurd is this scenario, they ask? We asked Daniel Westcott, a forensic anthropologist at Texas State University, to explain the science behind Weekend at Bernie's. So then it goes on to say that the first problem with the movie is that Andrew McCarthy and Jonathan Silverman have a pretty easy time moving Bernie's body around. So in the movie, it says they kind of look strained while they're hoisting him up, but according to Westcott, without the dead person's assistance, it would feel like trying to carry around a 150-pound bag of loose potatoes. So it would be very difficult to do in real life, and they probably would have had a lot more strain than they did in the movie. And then this also goes on to say that Bernie would be stiff as a board for most of the movie as well. Only 2 to 4 hours after his death, pretty much when the party breaks out at his house, rigor mortis or muscle stiffness would become a factor. So Westcott says that once rigor mortis set in, it would be very difficult for them to move Bernie's joints. So I don't know if they can make him wave or not. And it would usually start to dissipate after 24 hours. So for most of that movie, at least at the main party that they had the first night, Bernie would have been in rigor, or he would have had rigor mortis, and it would have been really hard to move his joints. And then it says, the next day after his death, Bernie is propped up in a golf cart, his arms waved at locals. He even spends some time sunbathing by the pool. And that whole time he looks good, even healthy. Now, in real life, it says this is what would happen. Soon after his death, autolysis would begin. That's the process in which cells break down, and bacteria, fungi, and protozoa start the putrefaction process, which produces several gases. And the side effects of that include bloating, discoloration of the skin, and a bad smell. I don't think that would be very pleasant to be around. So this goes on to say that by the end of the weekend, he would probably be turning green or black in the face and abdomen, and his face and belly would be starting to show signs of bloat, Westcott said. And then the article goes on to say that basically Bernie's body would be kind of swarming with flies the entire weekend. So even that first party, he would probably have flies coming to him naturally because they're attracted to the smells that his body would be putting out. And so obviously that wouldn't be very good if you're trying to convince people that he's still alive. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a lot of living people with flies swirling around him at that level. And then it goes on to say that there's one scene where Bernie's body is in the ocean. And if a dead body washed up on shore like that in real life, they say that he'd probably be being eaten by crabs and other small animals. So he would look pretty bad at that point. And then in a little twist, there's actually something that the movie got right, according to this expert. And it says that, oddly enough, one of the more realistic scenarios involves the two main characters using Bernie's body as a flotation device. The body would float if it was in the bloat stage, Westcott said. So maybe that dead body would actually float if it was bloated already. However, by that point, the body would be starting to marble, change color, and smell really bad. So maybe you wouldn't want to hold on to it anyway, unless that was the only way to survive. And so then the article finishes by saying that when the movie ends, Bernie is in good enough shape to dance in a conga line in the inevitable sequel, Weekend at Bernie's 2. Yeah, and obviously he would not fare so well in the real world. And so clearly the Weekend at Bernie's movie is not really possible to happen in real life, at least with all of the things that they did with the body. And maybe that's why these guys in the other article took the body back home. Maybe that stuff started to happen and they're like, oh crap, we got to put this guy at home. But then they still continue to have their night of fun. Meanwhile, their friend is dead back at home. And I don't really understand that situation. I wasn't there. I don't know what really happened, but that seems crazy to me. And the whole idea of Weekend at Bernie's is really interesting and funny, and also very dark, obviously. So that's kind of how Weekend at Bernie's would play out in real life, and how it did play out kind of in real life one time. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.